The rain fell hard that night in Chicago. The streets were dark and quiet, and the wind made the traffic lights swing back and forth. Water ran down the roads, shining under the yellow street lamps. On a lonely corner, at an old bus stop, a young girl sat with her knees pulled close to her chest. Her name was Emma Parker, only 16 years old, but her eyes looked much older, tired, lost, and full of pain. Her hoodie was soaked, and her jeans were covered in mud. She held a small backpack, the only thing she owned. Inside were 2 shirts, a notebook, and a photo of her mother, who had passed away years ago. The world had not been kind to her since. Emma had run away from her foster home 3 hours ago. Her foster parents always shouted at her, made her do chores all day, and called her trouble. She wasn't trouble, she just wanted love, but no one seemed to have any left for her. So, that night, after another fight, she packed her bag and left. Now she had nowhere to go. The bus stop gave her a little shelter from the rain, but she was freezing. She tried to keep her phone alive, but the battery had died long ago. No messages. No calls. No one to reach out to. Cars passed by fast, splashing water onto the pavement. No one looked her way. For the world, she was invisible, just another lost face in a big city. Then, suddenly, a small silver car slowed down near the stop. The window rolled down halfway, and a man's voice called out, "Hey, are you okay?" Emma froze. Her heart raced. She didn't trust strangers, especially not at night. She looked away and said nothing. The man waited a few seconds, then stepped out of the car. He was tall, wearing a gray jacket, and held an umbrella. He didn't come too close. "It's raining hard," he said gently. "You'll get sick sitting here." Still no reply. Emma stared at the wet ground, pretending not to hear him. The man sighed. "All right," he said, and walked back to his car. For a moment, Emma felt relief. But then, the sound of the car door shutting made her realize something: he wasn't leaving. The car engine turned off. He waited. A minute later, the man came back with a brown paper cup. He placed it on the bench, a few feet away from her. "It's just hot chocolate," he said quietly. "No strings attached." Emma looked at it suspiciously. Her stomach growled, but her fear held her back. The man smiled kindly. "You can sit here as long as you want. I'll wait in the car." He turned and walked back through the rain, leaving her alone again. She stared at the cup. Steam rose from it. The smell of chocolate filled the cold air. Slowly, she reached out, lifted it, and took a sip. It was warm, sweet, and safe, something she hadn't felt in months. Inside the car, Daniel Brooks watched from the rearview mirror. He was 32, an office worker who had just finished a long shift. When he first saw the girl at the bus stop, something inside him told him to stop. Maybe it was because he had once been lost too. Maybe it was because he had a younger sister who had died years ago. Whatever it was, he couldn't just drive past. After a few minutes, Emma stood up. She hesitated, then walked to his car window. Her voice was small. "You're not some creep, right?" Daniel smiled softly. "No. Just a tired guy who worries too much." She gave a weak laugh, the first laugh in a long time. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Just away." Daniel looked at her for a moment. "Okay. There's a diner a few blocks away. It's open all night. You can get warm there. I'll drop you off, that's all." Emma hesitated again. Her mind told her to run, but her heart, the tired, lonely part of her, said maybe this time it was okay to trust. "All right," she whispered. "Just to the diner." The car ride was silent. The rain hit the windshield like tiny stones. Daniel didn't ask questions. He just turned the heat on. Emma sat with her hands near the vent, trying to stop shivering. When they reached the diner, Daniel held the door open. Inside, the warm light and smell of pancakes filled the air. The waitress looked at Emma kindly, handing her a towel. Daniel ordered soup for her and coffee for himself. As Emma ate, she kept glancing at him, trying to understand his kindness. "Why are you helping me?" she asked finally. Daniel looked at his coffee. "Because someone once helped me when I had nothing." There was silence. The rain continued to fall outside. For the first time that night, Emma felt safe. Not because she trusted Daniel completely, but because, for the first time in a long time, someone had stopped to care. When she finished eating, Daniel drove her to a small youth shelter he knew. He spoke to the staff and made sure she had a bed. Before leaving, he handed her a small card. "If you ever need help, call me. My name's Daniel." Emma looked at the card. "Thank you," she said quietly. Daniel smiled. "Take care of yourself, Emma." As he walked back to his car, he glanced once more at the building. He had no idea that the girl he helped tonight would one day change his entire life. And Emma, as she lay down on the small bed that night, had no idea that the stranger who gave her hot chocolate would become the reason she found hope again. The next morning, the city looked different. The rain had stopped, and soft sunlight touched the wet streets. Emma woke up in a small shelter room, clean sheets, a warm blanket, and a quiet peace she hadn't felt in years. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then everything from last night came back: the bus stop, the hot chocolate, and that kind man named Daniel Brooks. On the table near her bed lay a piece of paper. It said, "Breakfast is served downstairs at 8 a.m. You're safe here. Shelter staff." She smiled weakly. Safe, that was a word she wasn't used to anymore. Downstairs, she met a few other girls around her age. Some looked tired, others hopeful. They talked about finding jobs or going back to school. Emma stayed quiet, just listening. Later that day, the shelter director called her into the office. "A man named Daniel Brooks dropped by this morning," she said. "He wanted to make sure you were doing okay. He left this note." Emma opened the folded paper. "I hope you slept well. Don't give up on yourself, Emma. You deserve a good life. Daniel." She felt something heavy in her chest, not sadness, but a warmth she didn't understand. No one had ever cared like that before. The next few days went by slowly. Emma started to adjust to the shelter routine. She helped clean, attended classes, and tried to stay positive. But sometimes at night, when everyone was asleep, she still cried quietly, afraid of what her future would be. Then one afternoon, she saw a familiar face outside the shelter gate: Daniel. He stood with a paper bag in his hand, smiling awkwardly. "Hey, stranger," he said. Emma's eyes widened. "You came back." "I said I would," Daniel replied. "I brought something." He handed her the bag. Inside were notebooks, pens, and a small sandwich wrapped in foil. "You mentioned you liked writing," he said softly. Emma smiled, for real this time. "How did you remember that?" Daniel shrugged. "I have a good memory for people who remind me of hope." They sat on a bench nearby, talking about small things: the weather, music, dreams. Daniel never asked too many personal questions. He didn't push her to tell her story. He just listened when she spoke and stayed quiet when she didn't want to. Over time, he started visiting once or twice a week. Sometimes they would walk around the park. Sometimes he would help her fill out school forms or bring her books to read. Little by little, Emma began to smile more. She started studying again and even took part in the shelter's art program. She painted pictures of sunsets and streets and one small painting of a car stopping in the rain. But Daniel's life wasn't perfect either. He worked long hours at a repair shop after losing his office job months ago. Bills piled up, and his apartment rent was overdue. He didn't tell Emma any of this. He didn't want her to worry. One evening, he arrived at the shelter later than usual. His shirt was dirty, and his hands were covered in oil. "Rough day?" Emma asked. He laughed tiredly. "Something like that." They sat on the steps as the sky turned orange. "You know," Emma said softly, "I used to think people only cared about themselves. But you proved me wrong." Daniel looked at her with a gentle smile. "Emma, sometimes all it takes is one person to make you believe again." She nodded. "You're that one person for me." Daniel didn't know what to say. He just looked at the girl who had been broken by the world and yet was slowly rebuilding herself piece by piece. Weeks passed. Emma started working part-time at a bookstore near the shelter. She loved the smell of old pages and the quiet of the shop. Every time Daniel visited, she'd hand him a book she liked. "You should read this," she'd say. And every time, he actually did. But life has a way of testing people when things start to look better. One afternoon, Emma came back to the shelter to find chaos. The manager told her the city funding had been cut. The shelter might close in a few weeks. "What will happen to everyone?" Emma asked, panic rising in her voice. "We're trying to find another place," the manager said. "But it's hard." That night, Emma cried again. She didn't want to go back to the streets. When Daniel found out, he tried to help. He called his contacts, searched online for other safe homes, and even offered to pay part of her rent if she found a room. But things weren't easy. His own money was tight. He never showed his struggle, but Emma could see the tiredness in his eyes. "Why do you keep helping me?" she asked one evening. Daniel paused. "Because when I was younger, someone did the same for me. And I promised I'd pass it on someday." Emma smiled sadly. "Then I hope one day I can do the same." But fate had other plans. One morning, Daniel went to the shelter but Emma wasn't there. Her bed was empty. The staff said she had left early, without telling anyone. Daniel tried calling the number she had given him. It was disconnected. He checked her workplace. She had quit 2 days before. He searched everywhere for her, asking people, driving through the same streets they once walked together. But Emma was gone. No note. No goodbye. Nothing. For days, Daniel couldn't sleep. He felt something missing, not just worry, but a deep emptiness. He had helped her find hope, but somehow, she had disappeared from his life like a shadow. He didn't know it then, but their story was far from over. 7 years had passed since that rainy night. The city of Chicago had changed: new buildings, new lights, and new faces, but Daniel Brooks still drove the same old car. The same car that once stopped for a lost girl named Emma Parker. He had searched for her for months after she disappeared. He visited shelters, called hospitals, even spoke to police officers. But no one had seen or heard of her. Eventually, time forced him to accept that maybe she wanted to disappear, maybe she needed to. Still, sometimes when it rained, Daniel caught himself looking at bus stops, half expecting to see her sitting there again. But the bench was always empty. Daniel now worked full-time as a mechanic in a small neighborhood garage. His hands were always dirty, his clothes smelled of oil, and his days felt the same: work, eat, sleep, repeat. He lived alone in a small apartment above a grocery store. No wife, no children, just silence and the ticking of a wall clock that sounded louder each night. He wasn't unhappy, but he wasn't really living either. Something inside him had gone quiet since Emma left, a kind of hope he didn't know how to get back. Sometimes he thought about moving away, starting over somewhere new. But every time he packed a box, he'd find something that made him stop: a small notebook Emma once gave him, filled with her short poems and dreams. He kept it in his drawer like a treasure. On its first page, in her messy handwriting, it said, "Thank you for helping me believe that good people still exist." One cold November morning, Daniel was at the garage fixing a customer's car when his co-worker handed him an envelope. "Hey, this came for you," he said. "Looks like it's hand-delivered." Daniel wiped his hands on a cloth. The envelope had no return address, only his name written neatly in blue ink. To Daniel Brooks. Curious, he opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper. He began to read and his heart started to race. "Dear Daniel, you once told me that kindness can change someone's world. You were right. You changed mine. Please come to this address tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. E.P." He read the initials again. E.P. Emma Parker. His hands trembled slightly. Could it really be her? After all these years? The next evening, Daniel followed the address written on the letter. It led him to downtown Chicago to a tall, newly built building made of glass and bright lights. He parked his car and stared up at it. There was a large banner hanging above the entrance that read, "Grand Opening, the Parker Hope Center, helping abandoned teens find a future." For a moment, Daniel couldn't move. His chest tightened. "Parker," he whispered. "Emma Parker." He stepped inside. The place was filled with people, reporters, volunteers, city workers, and young faces that reminded him of Emma at 16. The walls were decorated with photos of smiling teenagers and motivational quotes. At the front of the hall stood a stage with a microphone. Daniel took a seat quietly in the back, his eyes scanning the crowd. And then, suddenly there she was. Emma. She looked completely different, yet exactly the same. Her hair was longer now, tied neatly behind her shoulders. She wore a simple white blouse and spoke with calm confidence. But her eyes, those same deep, kind eyes, still carried warmth. Emma walked up to the microphone as the crowd clapped. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice clear and full of emotion. "Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Emma Parker, and this center, the Parker Hope Center, is a dream I've carried for many years." Daniel leaned forward, listening closely. "When I was 16, Emma continued, I was lost. I had no family, no money, and no reason to believe in kindness. I thought the world had forgotten about me." The crowd grew quiet. But one cold, rainy night, a stranger stopped his car. He didn't ask for anything. He just helped. He gave me food, a place to stay, and most importantly, hope. Daniel felt tears form in his eyes. "That one small act of kindness changed everything for me," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Because of that man, I went back to school, got a scholarship, and started working with youth shelters. And tonight, I'm opening the center for kids who were once just like me, scared, alone, and invisible." Emma paused, looking around the crowd. Then her eyes stopped right where Daniel sat. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Their eyes met across the room, and everyone noticed her sudden silence. A soft smile spread across her face. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said finally, her voice breaking slightly, "the man I'm talking about is sitting right there." The entire room turned toward Daniel. People clapped as Emma stepped down from the stage and walked toward him. Daniel stood up slowly, unsure what to do. When she reached him, she didn't say a word, she just hugged him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "You saved me." Daniel's voice was quiet. "You saved yourself, Emma. I just gave you a ride." She laughed softly through her tears. "No, Daniel. You gave me a reason to believe." That night, after the ceremony ended, Emma took Daniel on a tour of the center. She showed him the dorm rooms, the library, the art studio, and the classrooms. Every wall was filled with messages from kids saying things like, "Thank you for believing in us. This place, Emma said proudly, is built on what you taught me, that even small kindness can change lives. Daniel looked around, speechless. He never imagined his small act all those years ago could grow into something so powerful. He smiled softly. You did all this, Emma. You turned your pain into hope. She looked at him with watery eyes. And I couldn't have done it without you. That night, as Daniel drove home under the quiet city lights, he finally felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. Sometimes life takes people apart to bring them back stronger. And sometimes, one act of kindness becomes a light that never fades. But Daniel had no idea that Emma still had one more surprise waiting for him. That night, Daniel could barely sleep. Every moment from the event replayed in his head: the crowd's applause, Emma's speech, her voice trembling when she said, "He saved me." He kept asking himself the same question: was that really the same scared girl from the bus stop? The one who could barely speak without fear? The one who disappeared without a goodbye? Now she was standing on a stage, confident, strong, and helping others. He smiled to himself, staring at the letter she had sent him, the same neat handwriting that had led him there. For the first time in years, Daniel felt proud of something he'd done. The next morning, Emma called. Her voice was full of energy. "Daniel, I hope you're free today," she said. "There's someone I want you to meet." Daniel chuckled. "I'm not sure I'm ready for more surprises, Emma." "Too bad," she laughed. "You're already part of the plan. Be here at 2 p.m. When he arrived at the Parker Hope Center, Emma was waiting at the door, wearing a navy blue blazer and that same bright smile. "You look happy," Daniel said. "I am," she replied. "For years, I dreamed about this day, and I wanted you to be here for every part of it." She led him through the building, showing him rooms he hadn't seen the night before. There was a kitchen where teens learned cooking, a computer lab where volunteers taught digital skills, and even a music room filled with instruments. "This is amazing," Daniel said. "You've built something incredible." Emma nodded. "We built it, you just didn't know you were part of it." He gave her a puzzled look, but she only smiled mysteriously. They walked into a room with soft blue walls and photos on display. Daniel stopped when he saw one. It was her painting. The same one she had made years ago in the shelter, a small car stopping in the rain. Underneath, a golden plaque read, "The night hope stopped to help." Daniel's throat tightened. Emma stood beside him, her eyes soft. "I kept that painting all these years," she said quietly. "It reminds me that one small moment can change everything." He turned to her. "Emma, you didn't need to do all this." "I didn't do anything special." She shook her head. "You did the most special thing of all. You cared when no one else did." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was peaceful, filled with memories of how far they had both come. Then Emma smiled again. "Come on, I still have that surprise for you." She led him to her office. On the desk sat an envelope with Daniel's name written neatly. He frowned playfully. "Another letter? Should I be nervous?" "Maybe a little," she said with a grin. He opened it slowly. Inside was a printed document with a heading that made him blink twice. "Director of Maintenance, Parker Hope Center." Daniel looked up, confused. "Emma, what is this?" "It's your new job," she said simply. "Full-time. With benefits. And your own workshop in the back." He laughed in disbelief. "You're serious?" "Very," Emma said. "This place is your home too. You helped me build the idea of it, now I want you to help me keep it running." Daniel's voice softened. "Emma, you don't have to repay me for anything." Emma shook her head gently. "This isn't repayment. It's gratitude. You gave me hope when I had nothing. Now I want to give you purpose when you thought you'd lost it." For a moment, Daniel couldn't speak. His eyes glistened. I don't know what to say. Say yes, she said simply. He smiled. Then yes. Later that evening, the center hosted a small dinner for the staff and the teens. Emma and Daniel sat together, laughing with the kids as they shared stories. A young boy about 15 asked Daniel, "Sir, how do you know Miss Emma?" Daniel smiled. "Well," he said, "a long time ago, I met her at a bus stop on a rainy night." The boy looked amazed. "And you helped her?" Daniel nodded. "I just gave her a ride. She did all the hard work after that." Emma chuckled softly. "He's being humble. He gave me more than a ride, he gave me a reason to live." The table fell quiet. Everyone listened as Emma continued, "When I was at my lowest, he saw me as a person, not a problem. That kind of kindness can change someone forever." Daniel smiled, embarrassed but touched. "All right, that's enough about me," he said, trying to lighten the moment. But inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: belonging. After dinner, they walked outside together. The city lights sparkled, and the night air was calm. "You know," Daniel said softly, "when you disappeared all those years ago, I thought I lost you forever." Emma sighed. "I had to leave, Daniel. I was scared. I didn't want you to see me fail." "You wouldn't have failed," he said gently. "You just needed time." She nodded. "Maybe. But I promised myself that if I ever made it, I'd find you. I wanted you to see what your kindness started." He looked at her, smiling with pride. "You did more than make it, Emma. You built hope itself." For a few moments, they just stood there quietly, watching cars pass by just like that night years ago. Emma glanced up at him. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that night?" Daniel smiled faintly. "All the time. And I always thank God that I did." Before leaving, Emma hugged him tightly. "Your family now," she said softly. "This place, these kids, they're our second chance." Daniel hugged her back, his heart full. "You gave me mine too." As he walked to his car, he looked back at the glowing sign. Parker Hope Center. And for the first time in a very long time, Daniel didn't feel like a stranger in this world anymore. Sometimes, kindness finds its way back years later, when you least expect it. And sometimes, the person you once saved ends up saving you. The Parker Hope Center was bustling that morning. Teens laughed in the hallways, volunteers helped with breakfast, and the aroma of fresh coffee and toast filled the air. Daniel Brooks walked through the building, a small smile on his face. He now had a real purpose: maintaining the center, fixing things, and helping wherever he could. It wasn't just a job, it was a second chance at life. As he passed the library, he saw Emma Parker helping a young girl reach a book from the top shelf. The girl looked nervous, and Emma gently encouraged her, "It's okay, you can do it. I'll help if you need me." Daniel stopped for a moment, watching. He thought about the first time he met Emma, a scared, lonely girl sitting in the rain. Now she was a leader, full of confidence and kindness. He felt a surge of pride. Later, Emma found him in the maintenance workshop. She had a big smile on her face, but her eyes shone with something Daniel didn't expect: excitement. "Daniel," she said, "I have something to show you." He wiped his hands on a rag. "What is it this time?" She led him outside to a courtyard behind the building. There, dozens of teenagers had gathered, all holding signs and balloons. A banner read, "Thank you, Daniel Brooks, our reason to hope." Daniel's mouth fell open. What is this?" Emma smiled, tears forming in her eyes. "These kids, they all know your story. They know how one act of kindness can change a life. They wanted to thank you." A young boy stepped forward and handed Daniel a handmade card. It read, "You saved someone who saved us all. Thank you. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. For years, he had thought his small gesture offering a ride, a cup of hot chocolate was nothing. But now he saw the truth. One act of kindness had created a ripple, touching hundreds of lives. Emma stepped beside him. Daniel, this center exists because of you. Not because you gave me money, or solved my problems, but because you saw me. You treated me like a human being when the world didn't. And that made all the difference. Daniel shook his head. Emma, you did everything yourself. I just helped a little. She laughed softly. A little. That little changed everything. You gave me hope, Daniel. And hope is the most powerful thing anyone can give. Later that evening, the center was quiet. Daniel and Emma walked through the empty halls, listening to the faint sounds of the city outside. You know, Daniel said softly, I never imagined my life would end up like this. I thought those days meeting you at that bus stop were just a small memory. I never guessed it would come back in such a big way. Emma looked at him with a gentle smile. Life has a funny way of coming full circle. You helped me when I had nothing, and now you have something too, a family, a purpose, a place where you belong. Daniel took a deep breath. I never realized that one night could change both our lives forever. Emma nodded. It did. And it will keep changing lives for years to come. That's the power of hope. Over the next few months, Daniel settled into his role fully. He fixed the building, built new workshops, and spent time with the teens. He listened to their stories, offered advice, and reminded them that one small act of kindness could lead to something amazing, just like it had for him and Emma. Emma and Daniel often sat together in the evenings, reflecting on their journey. Sometimes, they laughed about small things: spilled paint, broken chairs, or kids sneaking cookies from the kitchen. Other times, they were quiet, simply watching the sunset from the center's rooftop. And every time they looked at each other, there was a shared understanding, a bond created by trust, kindness, and hope. One chilly morning, Emma handed Daniel another envelope. He looked at it curiously. Open it, she said, smiling. Inside was a small note and a key. The note read, For all the times you saved me, for all the hope you gave, this is your place too. Welcome home. Daniel's eyes welled up. He held the key tightly. It wasn't just a key to a building, it was a key to a life he hadn't known he was missing. Emma put her hand on his shoulder. You didn't just change my life, Daniel. You gave hundreds of kids a chance to believe again. You saved me, and now you help save them. Daniel laughed softly, shaking his head. I can't believe this is real. It feels like a dream. Emma smiled warmly. It is real. And it's just the beginning. That night, Daniel sat on the rooftop with Emma, looking at the city lights. The wind was calm, and for the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. Do you remember that night? Emma asked softly. The first time we met. Daniel nodded. How could I forget? You were sitting there in the rain, and I thought, maybe I could help, just a little. Emma smiled, her eyes reflecting the city lights. And that little bit changed everything. For both of us. Daniel looked at her, feeling a warmth he hadn't felt in years. You know, he said quietly, sometimes I wonder if I could have ever imagined this life full of hope, full of people who care. Emma leaned on his shoulder. Hope has a way of finding us even in the darkest times. And sometimes, it comes from the most unexpected people. Daniel smiled. I'm glad it came from you. Emma laughed softly. No, Daniel, it came from you. Together, they sat in silence, watching the lights of Chicago sparkle. Their story, once full of loneliness and uncertainty, had come full circle. And as the stars shone above, one thing was clear: kindness, hope, and love have a way of finding their way back, sometimes years later, sometimes when we least expect it, but always when it's needed the most. Clapperboard final message for narration. A single act of kindness can echo for a lifetime. You never know whose life you might change or how your own life might be changed in return. Be someone's reason to hope.